Hello viewers, today I will show you how to solve a problem on your rear wheel drive Toyota which has a T50 transmission. This is valid for the AE86, for the T71 I believe, Corolla model, and some silicone models, as long as they are rear wheel drive. These models have the T50 transmission, which has an oil retainer on the input shaft. This is the symptom of this problem is when you have an oil leak between the gearbox and the engine, not on the side of the propeller shaft. I hope this video may help you solve this common problem. Since I am not a professional mechanic, when I reassembled the gearbox I forgot to replace that seal, and now I had to take it apart again. So learn from my mistakes and don't do this when you reassemble your gearbox. Always replace the seals, always make clean gaskets, always replace the retainers. That's my advice. So let's start with this repair. I hope you enjoyed this video and keep those comments and likes coming.
If you have leaks between the engine and the gearbox, approximately in this location, you see the oil leaking out from where the engine meets the gearbox. The first step is to analyze the color of the oil that comes out. If the oil is black, you have a leak on the engine side. That oil is engine oil, and there is a retainer or a gasket on the side of the engine that is leaking. If you have if your fluid is a little more clear, like yellow or red, in case of you using gearbox oil that is red in color, you have a leak on the side of the gearbox. I'm not really sure where the leak is. I know that it is from this side, and the only place where it can leak from is from the center shaft, from the input shaft. That's the name. I've already removed the gearbox, as you can see. I've already removed the clutch bearing, as you can see, clutch release bearing. Here it is. I analyzed the surrounding area of this shaft, and there seem to be no leaks in this zone here, in this area, which indicates that the leak is not on the gasket that is behind this retainer with these 4 bolts. The leak has to be from the middle, from the center of the shaft. At least that's what I hope the reason to be, because the color of the fluid I can find in the floor is yellow, not black as in engine oil. So behind this retainer there is a seal that I did not change when I replaced when I rebuilt this gearbox. I did not replace this seal, and I am learning now that maybe it should be replaced every time. So here is the part number for your reference. Now I will start with replacement. So the first step to replace this retainer seal is to remove these 4 bolts that hold this holding retainer. So I have applied a bit of brake cleaner to remove the clutch dust in this area, and now you can see the end of the paper gasket on the retainer. We have to try and pry out the retainer, remove the remains of the old gasket that may be helping to stick the retainer to the bell housing, to the clutch bell housing, and hopefully this whole part will come out. To help release the retainer, look for the outer area. You see, not on the thread. There is a thread there, a bolt thread, after the retainer. Don't hammer there. Insert a long shaft really on the border, you see, and then apply some hammer taps to make the retainer rotate. This will help loosen it. Now we set the bearing retainer on the vise, and we have to remove the old ring, the old gasket. So just insert your gasket puller and pry out the old seal. There it is. Clean the surface carefully Now we are ready to insert the new seal. While you are at this, get some degreaser, like brake cleaner, and clean up the surface where the gasket will be made. The idea is to degrease the surface to ensure that the mating surface will be perfect when remaking the gasket. Now insert the new seal and with a flat wood chop, tap softly to press it in.
Now I'm cloning the gasket, using the old one as a stencil, and then cut up a new gasket using a blade, and then you can see the finished product ready to go into the retainer.
Before remaking the gasket, make sure that the new paper gasket will fit without any stretching or kinking. In this case, I can see that my paper gasket needs to be trimmed before inserting it. It must be inserted without any stretching at all. So I'm using a blade to trim the inside a little bit to make sure that it goes in perfectly. You see, just going around the inside of the gasket will remove a very thin amount of paper, as you can see in my hand, and it may be enough to make the gasket fit perfectly. Don't remove too much paper. Do this gradually in small steps. After you have the paper gasket ready, get your gasket maker. It's a high temperature silicone, your screwdriver, and get the bits of silicone and rub it on this outside of the gasket contact area. Make a thin layer and then place the wait a little bit for the silicone to dry. You don't have to. You mustn't insert the paper gasket without letting the silicone just dry a little bit, just for 3 minutes, for example, and then insert the paper gasket into the mating surface. This is not mandatory. Toyota does not say this in the manual, but I want to be double sure that this will not leak, so I am making a paper gasket with 2 layers of silicone on each side. So now we insert the gasket, we make sure that it is properly seated all around, run your finger around that, and now we have to apply a little bit of multi-purpose grease or axle grease on this inside area to make sure that the splines on the input shaft do not rub against this area, because this is the reason why the seal will leak. Before applying the grease, however, make sure to make the second layer of silicone on the other side of the paper gasket. Spread this all around carefully. Now I am applying a thin layer of silicone-based lubricant on the splines and on the input shaft overall to decrease the chances that the input shaft will damage the inside lip of this retainer. Now, with my hand, without using any tools, I will apply a very thin quantity of multi-purpose grease to the inside lip of this retainer. It's all of this is necessary to reduce the chances of the inside of the lip being damaged when in contact with the splines on the input shaft. This is really important. Now, after inserting the retainer, very slowly, not to scrape the inside lip of that retainer against these splines, just place the bolts and tighten them. You can see as I tighten the excess silicone coming out. Do this evenly as possible all around the bolts for the gasket to be made as evenly as possible. Using your torque wrench, torque the 4 bolts to 13 foot-pound. Now I am applying just a little bit of anti-seize compound to this sliding surface. Now the last step is to reinsert the clutch release bearing, reinsert the clutch release fork, which is this part that runs from the inside to the outside of the gearbox, reinsert the springs that hold the fork to the clutch release bearing. You see the position where the springs must be inserted. Here the long leg of the spring is turned towards the clutch release bearing, and then the smaller one that makes a curve like a snail-like shape goes on the backside of the clutch release fork. I think that's all for the inside. Now regarding the boot, don't forget to reinsert the boot in the correct position. The flap, the rubber flap, should go in here on the like the smaller part of the cone shape of the boot, and check the place where the clutch slave cylinder will operate against the fork. If there is no grease here, or if the grease is dry or old, clean everything and replace with new grease so that the pin of the secondary of the slave clutch pump will operate smoothly against the fork and not grind in this notch here. So after all these operations are performed, the gearbox is ready to go back in the car. However, do not forget that the silicone sealant will have to cure, and it's better to, if you have the chance, to wait overnight, wait approximately 24 hours before reinserting the gearbox into the car, because we want to achieve the best performance on the silicone sealant, to only fill up the gearbox with oil after the silicone is completely dry and completely cured. I don't know, maybe some more experienced mechanics will tell you otherwise. I'm not in a hurry to deliver this car to any client, so I'll just leave this to dry overnight and cure the gasket on the seal.
So, I hope the video was not too long and that it may help you keep your car in good shape and save you some money at the Toyota dealer. These videos are not intended to be absolute truth. I only learned from the Toyota manual and I'm not a professional mechanic. So take these videos with your critical sense, and if you have any suggestions, if you have any comments, or if you spot any imprecision, any lack of correctness in my videos, please feel free to drop me a comment. My goal is not to pass on as an expert. My goal is just to help you guys keep as many Toyota Corollas and similar vehicles on the road. Till next time, take care and keep your car in top shape.